Hello and welcome. Today's webinar is on problems and solutions for students entering ELL at the secondary level. Today's webinar will be highlighting best practices in ELL instruction. We will also be sharing school success stories on solutions for ELL students at the secondary level. The webinar today is hosted by the BLE Group. Thank you for joining us. Reviewing our agenda for the webinar today, we will first begin with an overview, an explanation of who the BLE Group is, and why does ELL matter. Joining us then will be three presenters today. First, Carmen Fernandez from Sunnyside School District in Arizona will be giving us an overview of the problem and data to support it. Then we will have a case study and demonstration by Brenda Hughes from Fairmont Preparatory Academy in California. Then Dan Fichtner from Palos Verdes Unified District, also in California, will be sharing another case study. Our hope is that the case studies give some context to the problem and demonstrate a great solution for how these districts have been able to have success with ELL students at the secondary level. Finally, we will finish our session today with a Q&A session for our attendees. My name is Julie Carter, and I am the Vice President of the BLE Group. Joining me also today is my colleague, Dr. Elliot Levinson, CEO of the BLE Group. The BLE Group is a network of 180 EdTech decision makers from around the country. We're working superintendents, CIOs, and heads of instruction in K-12 districts. We work with EdTech products in schools, really developing instructional improvement. We also have a focus on thought leadership. We're very interested in the topic of secondary performance in ELL, because we know it's a major cause of slow improvement and dropout rates across the country. The webinar today is targeted for Arizona school districts. We know that Arizona is unique in the mandated 4-hour block of time required for teaching ELL students in Arizona schools. The issue as we see it is that 1.7 million students are affected by this nationally. What we know is that traditional methods have been ineffective at helping students who come in at that secondary level with their language acquisition skills. What we do know is that there are new approaches that are extremely promising, and that is what we're hoping to highlight today in our two case studies where new approaches to teaching students at the secondary level have proven very effective. I'd like to turn the presentation over to our first presenter, Carmen Fernandez, Director of Language Acquisition and Literacy at Sunnyside School District in Tucson, Arizona. Welcome, Carmen.
My name is Carmen Fernandez, and I'm the Director of Language Acquisition and Literacy here in the Sunnyside Unified School District. The issue that we're discussing right now is pertinent. We're dealing with this ourselves right now, and that secondary ELL students are a subgroup that are at risk, and what has traditionally worked for them in the past is not necessarily as effective given the new content standards that we're working with. And I'm hoping that the approaches that we're talking about today will help address that. And so currently in our district we have, as you can see, about 18,000 students, with a great majority of those students on free and reduced lunch. In addition, we have a relatively large ELL population of at least 22% currently. And yearly, although we reclassify about 30% of our students, the majority of those students are in our elementary schools. We have a much lower reclassification rate that we'll talk about on the next slide. In addition, we have been making gains with our general ed and elementary students, meeting and or exceeding on the state reading standards, but we're struggling with our secondary ELL students in meeting the standards. So in Arizona, we currently have a state-mandated 4-hour SCI block in which our ELL students are homogeneously grouped together for those 4 hours, which includes instruction in reading, writing, listening and speaking, and grammar. So they have an hour of each of those content areas. With that, though, it means that they are outside of content area instruction and standards, and so we're trying to integrate those so that they still have access to the Arizona college and career ready standards as well as the ELD standards. So once again, our 4-hour block seems to be helping with reclassification at our elementary schools where we have that higher reclassification rate. But in high school, last year it was about a 4% reclassification, 1%. And the state requires us to have at least 23% reclassification. And part of that is due to the inconsistency of teachers, which we're trying to address this coming school year. But because of different factors, we have moved to a more structured curriculum implementation at both middle school and high school. So we've adopted curriculum for them and have been meeting and having coaching sessions with those teachers to provide that very structured support for not only our students, but to help our teachers better address the needs of our ELL students. So that's about where we're at with in Sunnyside. What we hear today will help us as well in the curriculum that is implemented for our secondary students.
Thank you, Carmen. That was really nice to get a background of the information in regards to how Arizona is using that 4-hour block of time, certainly different by district, but the challenges that they're facing with that, the problems that you're having currently with secondary ELL students, and how this new wave of Common Core is really impacting what it is that you're teaching and the need for new solutions at the secondary level. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Brenda Hughes, ESL Curriculum Specialist from Fairmont Preparatory Academy.
My name is Brenda Hughes, and I'm the ESL Curriculum Specialist at Fairmont Private Schools. In our high school specifically, we have 650 students. 67% of them are international, meaning they're from 26 different foreign countries. Many of them come from very low English levels with very low academic skills. And we've created shelter programs that are either 3 hours a day or 6 hours a day, depending on their level, along with after-school tutoring. And our problem actually grew very quickly. As we started to lose our domestic population, we tried to recruit more and more international students. And the more you recruit, the more came at lower levels. So we had many, many students coming from levels 1 through 4. And we found that the level 1 to level 3 students were unable to reach the level 4 needed for our students to mainstream. And the mainstreaming process or reclassification process was taking 2 or more years. And by that time, students were aging out and not able to get all of their high school credit. So what we had to do was then we promoted students with lower English levels into our mainstream programs. And we discovered that we had a 65% dropout rate, meaning those students either had to be exited out of our school to go to another school because this starts their college, or basically they went back to their home country. So what we found was our problems were mainly because of the curriculum. We tried to deliver English instruction via fiction only, and we found that with that, the students were unsuccessful in mainstream classrooms. When they got to their history or their science classes, they didn't know the language of school. All they knew how to do was maybe do the content area of English literature, but they didn't really build their English language proficiency levels. We also used an ESL publisher textbook, and the students found that these books were not relevant. The students were very frustrated in their learning, and they felt very unmotivated. And the teachers were also frustrated because they felt that the curriculum was inflexible, that it didn't change to the times. We wanted to infuse technology, and we weren't able to do that with the current curriculum. And so we discovered these problems in 2011. So what we tried to do was we wanted to create a new program with the ESL philosophies of today. So CBI is content-based instruction, CLT is communicative language teaching, and blended learning. So our curriculum that we have created, developed, and implemented into our classrooms is now with the 3 philosophies of CBI, CLT, and blended learning. We also use a learning management system called Blackboard, so the students can interact with the technology as well as it houses all of our curriculum. We used content-based instruction, so we use history, science, and English topics to teach English. And we have a curriculum that's from the basic to advanced level. So we have a basic, beginning, intermediate, and advanced course. And when we teach our students, we group them by ability level, and the content is L+1. So students always feel like they are challenged. There is some sense of rigor. This ELL curriculum that we developed, Eloquence, and Thesys is part of Fairmont Education Group, and Fairmont have partnered and created this curriculum, and we deliver it to our school as well as other schools, and we have done this in 3 years, and it's continuing to grow. Please. It really compares CBI, CLT, and a traditional classroom. In CBI, it's more academic in nature. We use informational text, which is what Common Core asks for, a huge chunk of reading informational text. We use science, history, and English topics using authentic material and not oversimplifying it. And it really triggers critical thinking for students to develop critical thinking skills when they read topics. And topics that are relevant to the students. And of course, we always do vocabulary and context, and we talk about the writing process and teach them writing process. CLT talks more about teaching English to communicate meaning. So fluency over correctness, students are able to collaborate, they express their words, and that's something that a lot of programs are very weak in. And we always have the grammarian context, and students are always reflecting on their learning, and they're interacting in their own learning. This is in relation. This is comparing it to the traditional classroom. Next slide, please. The next slide talks about how we start off a course. So every chapter starts off with an essential world and how the content relates to them in the world and also to something maybe in the past. So you might have an essential question like, what does freedom mean when you're talking about Abraham Lincoln? Could you go to the next slide, please? Students can speak about these questions. They can also write about these questions and have debates about these questions. Then you'll see the text in context, so students can learn vocabulary in context. We also have vocabulary slides so students can then learn the vocabulary, but at this point we really do stress practice activities and games for students to practice the vocabulary as well as comprehension of the text. Next. Every lesson has a flow, so it starts off with an essential question. And then we have schema building where they learn background about a topic. We introduce new material, and then we practice with them. And then, of course, we have formal assessments. And all of this is included in our LMS Blackboard for every chapter. The next is a sample of students. This is student.
My preferred nature place would be Bali, located in Indonesia. When I was 13 years old, I visited Bali with my family. This spectacular island is surrounded by blue clean waters. During my stay, it drizzled down soft rain. I enjoyed this light rain, and I playfully swam with my younger sister in the pool. At night, we went to a famous restaurant filled with countless people. We are then seated next to a big window with a stunning view of the sea. Bali's special features would definitely include their delicious foods and fascinating swimming pools. I would love to visit Bali again.
Next, we wanted to present our results. We did a 3-year study of students. Currently, right now, we're going to be starting our using this course. But in the first year, students were reclassed reclassified at a 60% rate, meaning we actually tested, we had a control group of basic and beginners. If you move to the next slide, it'll show the results. So our group was made up of basic and beginning students, so 100% of them started in that area, and after 1 year, as you can see from this chart, 60% of them were able to be reclassified to mainstream at the end of the year. And then in the next slide, it shows our year 2 results. This is this past year. You can see that we had students start at many different levels. 47% of our students started at basic and beginning, and at the end of the year, only 8% were left. So that means that 83% of our students were able to be mainstreamed or year. And actually, this is when we added more to our development and implementation process in our courses, where we trained the teachers, we developed sample lesson plans, and we had teachers implement it as their entire curriculum. And from the teachers that were teaching these students after in mainstream, so in their science and history classes, they reported that the teachers did a significant difference in their English language usage in the classroom. They were able to participate. They were able to read, have better reading comprehension and writing skills.
Brenda, thank you so much. How impressive to see what you've done, not only in designing and developing, but in implementing it. What fantastic student results and what it is you're seeing. Our next speaker today is Dan Fichtner, ELD Support, Palos Verdes Peninsula USD. Dan, welcome.
We see that the reclassification process for English learners is quite rigorous. They have to get a C or better, and it's very difficult to attain this in the mainstream classes. So we have students entering also and exiting at all times of the year. And they enter at all language levels. They could be beginning, early intermediate, or as they have now, they are emerging, bridging, and expanding, and then bridging. We have a total of 851 English learners in our district, and they vary at the different school sites, so we have different programs to meet the needs. And we were looking for something that would be somewhat consistent across the board for the secondary students. So at the intermediate and high school levels, as opposed to elementary, there's a much more catch-up to do. There's much more vocabulary to learn and other cultural and academic hurdles to jump over. So ELs need to adjust linguistically and academically. So just like the impatient Papa Tomato said to the baby tomato, when he squished him, he said, "Catch up." This is exactly what our secondary English learners have to do. They have to catch up. We have beginners, we give them 3 hours a day. So this is pretty close to that 4 hour a day in Arizona. Expanding students get 2 hours a day that they're working, and bridging gets 1 hour a day. We also have homework clubs at the schools. Just need extra help in some of their content areas. They are able to get help with an English learner, special help. We have less than 2% dropout rate, so, but it still takes 3 to 4 years to reclassify the students if they come to us in 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th, or after that in high school. We've used publisher materials, but they have limited listening and speaking activities. And we found that for our beginners especially, that listening and speaking is extremely important, because if they can listen and speak, then they can write. And many of the students go home and work on the material when they get home, so that's kind of a nice thing that's happening. And there is a menu of content to choose from, so teachers can work with students to say, well, how about the next unit? You want to work on some science, you want to work on some social studies, literature, so it's a very democratic feel in the classroom, and you get much more relevance built into it at that point. For instruction, there's computer. And the computer never touches, so the student misses the, well, again, help me again. Teachers sometimes get a little bit bored with that, but computers never. And then in summer, oh, where did you go? Okay, go back, please. Okay, in the summer, they have 3 hours and and 1.5 hours on the computer usually, so that's good. Fall and spring, there's classroom instruction. It's teacher-led, then the computer lab they go to, or they're at home, and they're doing lots. They're speaking, they're blogging, they're reading, they're writing, they're doing vocabulary. They're producing a lot of language that has to do with what they are learning, and it's based, okay? And it aligns with the Common Core. So that's another good thing. Next slide, please. Okay, most of the review is done with the computer, okay, not with the teacher. And then the teacher chooses the content with student input. As I mentioned before, that's a real democratic feel in the classroom, and that's one of the best practices, that the classroom is a democratic piece, just like long ago with Dewey. In and out of the class, they create expressive examples. They are producing language. They are creating a product that is linguistic. Okay? They produce language using the content learned. They are reflecting on the learning, and they collaborate. So that again goes to the collaborative learning way. They learn authentic content. It's really real world. One of the things they talk about is smoking bad for you? Everything has a personal or a real world basis to it. And there are discussion boards where students can talk with each other, tell each other, I like the idea about such and such, and then somebody else says, yeah, I was thinking about that too, etc. And so you're building fluency in the language, not necessarily correctness, but fluency, and that comes first. Next slide, please. Go to the center of the learning. Computer. Yeah, our results. We got great results given the time allotted. It was about 100 hours, with about 1/4 of the time devoted to computer work. There were discussion sessions. It improved their speaking skills and all of the classroom activities. The teachers and the English learners both enjoyed the ability to use the technology and also learn English through social studies and other informative texts. There was no quantitative study done last year. This year we are going to have a pre-test program. If you remember the 3 R's of education, relationships, you get to know the students. Once you can do that, then you can figure out what might be of interest to them, and then you have relevance. And once you have relevance, then you can make it rigorous. You have rigor. You're knowing them, you decide what is relevant, and then you challenge your students with high, realistic expectations. And that's what this program helps you to do. And I think that's the end.
I mean, since you are working with these kids on a daily basis, are there any indicators like less behavior problems, less absence, more engagement with teachers and their peers, faster integration into the Anglo culture? Are you know, what are the qualitative things that you would say?
Yeah, there's less sending kids to the office or scolding them for doing something that they shouldn't be doing, because once they get on the computer, they know they're supposed to be working on vocabulary, or they're supposed to be reading that paragraph and answering questions. Because they've chosen that particular piece to work on. So it does it has a lot more relevance built into it, and therefore teaching becomes more of an enjoyment because you're learning with the kids. They come up with different ways of thinking about things, and they tell you, hey, did you know that blah, blah, blah? Because they're not just using this, they're going online and they're Googling things, and they're coming up with even new ideas from what's in this program. So it's really, blended is really great because you've got direct instruction, you know what you have to do, and then you have the part where they're going on the computer and they're working on their own, and then they're doing their own work. So it's a great piece. I think it's got a lot of the best practices that we have identified.
Okay. Good. And before we really move into the Q&A, I think it would be helpful if, since you both used Thesys, which is a brand new product, Brenda, why don't you talk about Thesys, how it got developed, and if anyone from Thesys is on the phone can talk, because it may be of interest to the people in Arizona.
So Thesys is a partner of Fairmont Private School, and Thesys was mainly created to leverage technology in the classroom to create a format for our teachers to create curriculum that can then be leveraged into technology and duplicated for other teachers, especially teachers in other schools, public, private, as well as the world. So Thesys is a company that sells our curriculum out to other companies, and we give professional development along with the sale, as well as a teacher mentor, and also ongoing support.
Okay.
I remember when I first went to look at the program, I was so really amazed at how much of I've been in English ESL since the 1979-80, and how much Brenda had put into that program with the content-based instruction and the interaction and so forth. It was all there. You could just see all of it being implemented, and it was great. And I think it was Dr. Brown you studied under in San Francisco, yeah. Brenda? Yeah.
Right.
And he's a guru when it comes to second language acquisition, and she had all of his teachings were directly applied in the program.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Is Diana Smith, or is anyone from Arizona schools still on and not muted, so that you either have comments or questions about what you've seen?
I have a quick question. This is Carmen from Sunnyside. Who was involved in the development of the curriculum?
Okay.
Brenda? Yeah.
I actually authored the curriculum. Now I am working with a team with more writers, but I would write it, and then I worked with an instructional designer through Thesys, and then Thesys and the instructional designer would put that onto the platform of the Blackboard learning management system, and now we create iBooks for every chapter. So basically, it was a project with 3 or 4 people at first, and now about 15 people.
And the iBooks are fantastic, full of color, gorgeous visuals, really great stuff.
Okay. Is Thesys an education company, or basically an IT company that has taken your work and developed it?
They are an education company. You can think of them as publishers, but they also help educate and give professional development for the technology as well as the education ESL piece. And we also do aided G courses for domestic, or not domestic, but mainstream programs. But it was built out of our Fairmont private school, so it is all about education and educators.
Okay. Carmen, since you deal with this every day, and and I think Sunnyside is a very high-quality district in terms of its impact on immigrant students. What is your reaction to having seen this?
I'm quite interested in seeing more of the curriculum because I believe that the more engaged that we can get our students to be would be, will help all of our classes. In addition, we are moving to this area of one-to-one, and our curriculum is online curriculum, but there's very little online curriculum available for ELL students. And so that's why I was interested in asking who participated, and then what are the options of other schools using your product that you guys are in the midst of creating.
Okay. All right. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to say something or write into the chat section? So, Brenda, can you give out your contact information? Or the
So my contact information is on the slide. It's bhuey.rosas@fairmontschools.com. But I would prefer you to contact Alan Rudy at Thesys, intl.com. Normally, the questions go through him, and then I help answer.
Okay. All right. Before we close, I just want to say we've had 100% improvement in attendance. I thought this went extremely, we got past the beginning problem. It worked very well. Alan, do you want to say anything?
Just thank you, and hopefully you guys have all had a chance to learn something and can apply it yourselves if you'd like. We spent a lot of time and effort to learn how to do this well, and hopefully you learned something.
And this will be posted. We're going to be able to post this, and we will have our site in the next week. Are you going to post it on the Thesys site?
Yes, we will.
Okay. All right, and then we can send out notice of that to the Arizona ELL list, so they can know where to go. All right, thank you all very, very much. I thought you did a really good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Saying goodbye.